In any real democracy with a free and fair media, this would be the biggest story in the country, wall-to-wall coverage. It has been revealed that two Chinese microbiologists working in Winnipeg at Canada's top microbiology foundation were involved in the release of some of the most deadly pathogens known to man, which in all likelihood led to COVID-19. It is nearly known with 100% certainty, you'll never hear it from the media now, that the Wuhan virus was released from a lab. That's how COVID-19 started, from a lab. Yeah, all you conspiracy theorists out there, all of us who are shouting this from the rooftops, who were shut down and called racist misogynists by Justin Trudeau, who didn't believe in science, have been proved 100% correct. The virus was released from a lab, but what many people do not know, just released documentation that the Trudeau government attempted with all their might to cover up, reveals that the viruses that wound up in Wuhan may well have come from Manitoba, a Canadian microbiology lab where some of the most dangerous viruses known to mankind were being experimented on, were allowed to travel to China. And the government of Canada knew this and allowed the Chinese scientists to escape Canada after having knowledge that they had aided in the process of releasing these viruses to China, allowed to leave the country, escape to China, where they then changed their names. Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party of Canada, with 100% certainty, I've just ran all of the documentation through AI. The Liberal Party of Canada was 100% aware of this, and they still, after all of this, they still had the gall, knowing everything they knew, to attempt to procure vaccines from China. They tried to force the Canadian people to take experimental vaccines from China after they very well knew that the most dangerous viruses on the planet had escaped from our own microbiology lab, escaped to China, and they let the two scientists in charge go. How is Justin Trudeau still walking through the streets on a yacht with Katy Perry and doesn't have charges? Are you kidding me? I understand he was not charged for the ArriveCan app scandal. $60 million Canadian taxpayer dollars spent on an app that most experts estimate should have cost between $200,000 and $300,000. Wasn't charged for the We Charity scandal, where millions of dollars were shuffled to Trudeau family members at a charity that he had deep connections with. The SNC-Lavalin scandal, where he leaned incredibly hard on Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was eventually forced to resign due to the fact that she wanted to bring legitimate charges. Of course, invoked the Emergencies Act, which two federal courts have now said is illegal, was not charged whatsoever. In none of these cases, this man has been charged. Now documentation has been released that COVID-19 may well have originally originated in Canada, was certainly released from the Wuhan lab. What the hell is going on in this country? We no longer have a justice system. We have a police state that serves the best interests of the Liberal Party of Canada. Time and time again, we see, from an objective perspective, beyond a shadow of a doubt, criminal activity at the top of the Liberal Party of Canada, and never do the ethics commissioners, the RCMP, investigate it anyway. This is the largest two-tier justice system in the world. The number of scandals that, and I'm not talking minor scandals, I'm talking major scandals that this country has undergone over the past 11 years, I would argue one of the most corrupt governments, not only in the Western world, in the entire world, and not a single person, not a single high-ranking executive has paid any price whatsoever. This should be the largest story in the country. Of course, there's a total blackout on the fact that we now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the virus that COVID-19 lockdowns caused, that your Liberal Party of Canada told you you were a racist or a misogynist and unworthy of existing in society if you brought up, was released from a lab. It was man-made. It was not from a bat, as we were told conspiracy theorists were thought to believe. But now the fact that we allowed Chinese spies to leave this country, change their name when we knew what they were doing, is criminal. How is nobody paying any cost? I understand Mark Carney is now our prime minister. The conflict of interest that he has between China, Brookfield Asset Management, now bringing us closer and closer to China every day. A financial relationship unlike anything we've ever seen before. Refusing to recognize the forced labor that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt the Chinese Communist Party uses. Mark Carney refuses to acknowledge that, refuses to acknowledge child forced labor in China. I've seen the question asked to him time and time and time again. Never answers the question. Now, with the 2,000 companies at Brookfield that Carney is potentially tied to, the conflict of interest, his ethics screening a total joke, under 5% of those 2,000 companies looked into, and him bringing us closer to the Chinese Communist Party. In any legitimate country, we know that at least 11 MPs, there was election interference coming from China. In any legitimate country, there would be incredibly serious investigations going on to determine the exact relationship between the CCP, an absolutely brutal dictatorship, currently pulling out a genocide of the Uyghurs, where dissidents are shut up. There is no freedom of speech in China, and that's the model we're going after with China, in Canada, with Bill C-9. By the way, I will be filing a lawsuit against Bill C-9 as soon as it passes in the Superior Court of Canada. If you're interested in supporting, hit the Stripe link. So appreciate everybody who supports. Bill C-9 is the most dire threat about Canadians' God-given right to freely express themselves that we have ever seen in this country. Our country continues every day to get closer and closer to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this trove of documents comes out that lets us know beyond a shadow of a doubt the government of Canada was aware that our own microbiology lab in Manitoba was responsible for sending some of the deadliest viruses known to mankind over to China, and then Chinese scientists in Canada were allowed to leave the country while the government of Canada knew about it. The Trudeau government did absolutely everything they could to cover this up, but thank God in Canada we still have some FOI requests, some freedom of information. Pierre came out and spoke about this today. The relationship between the CCP and Canada, we now have a Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who never misses an opportunity to crap on the United States. So ridiculous, considering we owe our defense to the United States. Look on a map, we owe so much to the U.S. We could have never only spent 1.3% of GDP on national defense over the past decade, were it not for having such a strong, brutal neighbor in the U.S. Carney never misses an attempt to crap on the U.S., but rarely, if ever, does he have a negative word to say about China. Isn't that odd? The man never has a negative thing to say about the brutal dictatorship in China. This needs to be investigated. We need to shout this from the rooftops. This should be a front page story everywhere on the news. Don't let the CBC propagandists get away with burying this story. Canadians demand to know the truth.